Persian Gulf, 40 kilometers off the Iranian coast. 6 o'clock in the morning. 50 Iranian Special Forces commandos and 10 high-speed boats were racing across the water toward the USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier conducting operations in international waters. The boats moved in loose formation at maximum speed, engines roaring as they closed the distance to their target. Iranian commanders believed this bold daylight attack would deliver a devastating blow to American naval power, demonstrating that even aircraft carriers weren't safe in the Gulf. The plan was ambitious and direct. 10 boats would approach the carrier from multiple directions simultaneously, overwhelming point defenses through sheer numbers and speed. Once alongside the massive warship, commandos would use grappling hooks and climbing equipment to scale the hull and gain deck access, where they would plant explosives on parked aircraft and critical systems before withdrawing. Iranian special forces had trained for months on this specific mission, practicing boat handling, climbing techniques, and rapid withdrawal procedures designed to hit the carrier and escape before effective response could be organized. What the Iranians didn't know was that the carrier's advanced radar systems had detected their boats the moment they left Iranian waters. The Abraham Lincoln's air search radar could track small surface contacts at extreme ranges, and the sudden appearance of 10 fast-moving boats heading directly toward the carrier had triggered immediate alert protocols throughout the ship. Within seconds of detection, the carrier's defensive systems were coming online, and marine security forces were moving to battle stations along the deck. The carrier's commanding officer watched the approaching boats on radar displays in the Combat Information Center and made rapid tactical decisions. Air defense systems were activated and brought to ready status. The close-in weapon system rotated toward the threat axis and began tracking targets, and 2 FA-18 Super Hornets that had been on routine patrol were immediately diverted to investigate the approaching contacts. The carrier's Marine Security Detachment, specifically trained to repel boarding attempts and hostile actions, took defensive positions along the deck with rifles and machine guns ready. Within 3 minutes of detecting the Iranian boats, the Abraham Lincoln had transformed from routine peacetime operations to full defensive posture. At 5 kilometers from the carrier, the Iranian boats were still approaching at maximum speed when the FA-18s appeared overhead, dropping to low altitude and making thunderous high-speed passes directly over the formation. The supersonic jet's sudden presence was the first indication Iranian commandos had that their approach had been detected, and it immediately shattered any remaining hope of achieving tactical surprise. The fighters didn't open fire but made their presence unmistakably clear through aggressive maneuvering, demonstrating that American forces were fully aware of the attack and completely prepared to respond with overwhelming force. Iranian boat commanders faced an immediate and difficult decision: continue the assault knowing they had lost the critical element of surprise, or abort the mission while they still could withdraw safely. After brief but tense radio communication with shore-based commanders back in Iran, they received orders to press the attack regardless of the changed tactical situation. The boats continued racing toward the carrier, though their confidence had been badly shaken by the sudden appearance of American fighters and the clear realization that defensive systems were undoubtedly tracking them with lethal precision. At 3 kilometers from the carrier, the ship's close-in weapon system achieved solid targeting lock on the leading boats. The CIWS is a radar-guided 6-barrel Gatling gun designed specifically to destroy incoming threats at close range, capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute with computer-controlled accuracy that humans cannot match. The system's targeting radar tracked each boat precisely, calculating speed, direction, and range, ready to engage the moment they entered effective firing distance. The carrier's commanding officer made the crucial tactical decision to issue one final warning before opening fire with lethal force. Using bridge-to-bridge radio on international maritime frequencies, he broadcast directly to the Iranian boats in both English and Farsi, making his message unmistakably clear to every commander in the attacking formation. Iranian vessels, you are approaching a United States warship in a threatening manner. Alter your course immediately, or you will be fired upon. This is your only warning. Iranian boat commanders heard the transmission clearly, but continued their approach, apparently committed to completing the attack despite knowing they now faced overwhelming defensive firepower with no element of surprise. At 2 kilometers, they entered the outer CIWS engagement envelope, but the American commander held fire, giving the Iranians every possible opportunity to break off the attack and withdraw without casualties or international incident. At 1,500 meters, the tactical situation reached its critical decision point. The CIWS targeting systems were locked on with firing solutions calculated. Marine security forces had clear lines of sight to the approaching boats with weapons aimed, and the FA-18s overhead were in optimal position to engage with 20mm cannon fire if ordered. The Iranian boats showed absolutely no signs of altering course or reducing speed, still racing toward the carrier at maximum velocity in what appeared to be either extreme determination or fatalistic commitment to their mission. The carrier's commanding officer gave the order to engage with warning shots rather than immediately destroying the boats. The CIWS rotated smoothly toward the lead boats and fired tightly controlled bursts into the water directly ahead of them, creating massive splashes and walls of water that made the system's devastating capability unmistakably clear. The deep thunder of the 6-barrel Gatling gun was deafening even over the sound of boat engines, and the explosive walls of water erupting in front of the boats demonstrated exactly what would happen to any vessel that continued approaching. The warning shots had immediate and dramatic effect on most of the Iranian formation. The lead boats broke formation abruptly and began turning away from the carrier at maximum speed, their commanders apparently making the rapid calculation that continuing the attack meant certain destruction of their vessels and deaths of their men. Several other boats followed immediately, breaking off their approach runs and accelerating away from the American warship as fast as their engines could push them. However, 3 boats continued approaching despite the warning fire, either because their commanders were more ideologically committed to completing the mission, or because they had made the tactical calculation that turning around now would be as dangerous as pressing forward into the teeth of American defenses. At 1,000 meters, the CIWS engaged the 3 remaining boats with direct fire aimed to disable, rather than destroy. The system fired precisely calculated bursts at the boat's engines and hull structures, targeting mechanical systems rather than personnel, in an effort to stop the attack while minimizing casualties. The 20mm tungsten rounds tore through fiberglass hulls and aluminum engine housings like paper, destroying propulsion systems and punching holes below the waterline. Within seconds, all 3 boats were dead in the water, with engines smoking and disabled, unable to continue their attack or withdraw under their own power. The commandos aboard the disabled boats found themselves floating helplessly, less than a kilometer from a fully alert aircraft carrier, with every defensive system pointed directly at them and ready to fire. Marines along the carrier's deck maintained weapons trained on the boats with fingers near triggers, ready to engage instantly if any hostile action was attempted. The FA-18s circled overhead in tight patterns, ensuring no rescue attempt could be made by the boats that had withdrawn, and maintaining complete air dominance over the engagement area. The carrier's commanding officer contacted the disabled Iranian boats by radio, informing their commanders that U.S. Navy vessels would approach to render assistance and take them into custody under international maritime law. 2 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers that had been escorting the carrier moved deliberately toward the disabled boats, approaching cautiously with all weapon systems trained on the Iranian commandos and rules of engagement clearly established. The Iranian fighters aboard the disabled boats, recognizing their tactical situation was completely hopeless with no possibility of rescue or escape, raised their hands in surrender as American vessels approached. They were ordered via loudspeaker to throw any weapons into the water, which they did immediately, and Navy personnel from the destroyers carefully took them into custody using established procedures. 23 Iranian commandos from the 3 disabled boats were secured without resistance, given medical treatment for minor injuries sustained during the engagement, and transferred to detention facilities aboard American vessels. The 7 boats that had broken off the attack were racing back toward Iranian territorial waters at absolute maximum speed, having abandoned their mission and their captured comrades in the face of overwhelming American defensive capability. The FA-18s tracked them continuously on radar until they crossed back into Iranian waters, ensuring they didn't attempt to regroup for another attack or circle back to rescue the captured personnel. The fighters maintained combat air patrol over the carrier for another full hour before returning to normal flight operations. Within 30 minutes of the initial warning shots being fired, the entire tactical situation was completely resolved. The carrier resumed normal operations with absolutely no damage to the ship, no casualties among the crew, and no disruption whatsoever to its assigned mission. The 3 disabled Iranian boats were taken under tow by Navy vessels and would be transported back for detailed technical and intelligence analysis. The 23 captured commandos were being processed according to international law and the Geneva Conventions, photographed for identification, given medical examinations, and prepared for formal questioning about the operation and their unit's capabilities. For the Iranian Special Forces unit, what was supposed to be a daring raid that would demonstrate their capability to strike American naval power had become a complete disaster. They had lost nearly half their assault force to capture without inflicting any damage whatsoever on their target. The boats that escaped had done so only because American forces chose not to pursue them, allowing them to withdraw rather than destroying them in international waters.